How have
So
things been in the last 3 years?
oh
It
yeah,
was
was it
almost 3 years to the date I was there.
okay? Yeah, you know, it's in many ways it's been a blur. Things have definitely gotten pretty tough over the last 4 years with the
Uh-huh.
immigration and the construction of the wall and all of that. That's been really hard. And then you know, all of the anti-migrant policies that kind of came into play. The last, the migrant protection policies, which were really, let's lock everybody out of the United States, have been
Yeah.
for about a year and a half. And then the declaring the national disaster on the border due to COVID has put another stop to anybody really crossing. I haven't been across the border for about 10 months.
Okay.
So,
So traffic has been down then across the border. Migrant
yeah,
traffic.
definitely through the ports of entry, and then through the desert, it's been down as well. Just
So
although the deaths were the highest they've been in about 10 years this year.
yeah, I did see the map and they did look pretty numerous still. So I was a little bit alarmed and maybe surprised to see that. So do you think the decrease in migration was due to the attitude of the federal government, policies of the federal government, COVID, all of the above, or?
I think that's all. It's all related, and yeah. So, the struggle is everybody's backed up now in very dangerous situations in Mexico.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of people went back to their communities, which there was nowhere to go. A lot of people just moved away from the border. We actually opened up a shelter in Nogales, Mexico, that
Yeah.
has just right before the COVID hit. So we have
Oh.
about 260 to 280 people in a large shelter.
Oh, okay. Well, that's quite a lot of people.
That's a hell of a lot of people to keep, food and shelter and safe. We've had no COVID there.
Well, that's good.
The migrants are pretty much running the site.
Oh,
So
are they? Okay.
that's pretty cool.
So you had to abide by protocols there with mask and distancing and everything, or?
Yeah, that's part of the reason I haven't been across is just, trying to keep the migrants safe,
Okay.
keeping out of the way. So
So I wanted to ask some questions for our audience because they're not familiar with this and what you do. And so tell me, how did you end up in Southern Arizona with your ministry to begin
yeah,
with?
so before seminary, I had or when I was in seminary, I had spent a year or so in Latin America. My wife, I got married, and my wife is from El Salvador, so I kind of had deep connections to Latin America, and really had decided that as much as I wanted to live and work in Latin America, that was the last thing they needed was another gringo colonizer or whatever being there taking work, and what they really needed was they need people here in the United States working to kind of combat all the ugly rhetoric, but also to
Okay.
welcome, to change the narrative from a person of privilege, using my privilege
Sure.
to do that. And so when I went to seminary, I actually spent a year then in seminary in Latin America.
Okay.
And when I finished, I took a job. I'm sorry, I'll get my email off. When I finished seminary, I ended up being in a church for 5 years on the East Coast, but we didn't have any family back there. It was a great experience. And so
Yeah. Okay.
and I was an associate pastor. So when I was looking for a position, our idea was to get as close to the U.S.-Mexico border as possible.
Okay.
That was in 1998. So
Uh-huh.
free trade agreements had been signed in 1994. Most of the
Okay.
immigration was happening over in San Diego and in El Paso.
Okay.
But by 1998 and 2000, in that period of time, the immigration by our government was really pushed here to the remote areas of the desert.
Okay. And so you came here in 98. You said, and when did you start with the Samaritans? When
Well,
did that
so
start?
we started in actually on Pentecost Sunday 2000. There was a group of about 75 faith people and people of conscience. The old sanctuary movement workers were still around in Tucson. We met at the Friends, meeting house up in Tucson, and really talked about, because the push of immigration was really happening around here, and we were having migrants knocking on our doors, asking for
Literally knocking on your door.
literally knocking
Wow.
on our doors, the congregation, people in the congregation's doors,
Wow.
asking for water and to make a phone call and things like that. So we met as part of that group, and we decided that we needed to do something to alleviate the suffering. And so we decided to start putting water out. We also decided that we really, the Border Patrol was the primary voice. That was, when somebody wanted an interview or hear what was happening on the border, they went to the Border Patrol.
Okay.
And yet that was one perspective. That was not necessarily the community perspective. It wasn't a faith perspective. And so we said, hey, we want to be present and be an alternative voice to give voice of what we're seeing here.
Okay.
And then also to keep an eye on the Border Patrol and what was happening out there.
Okay.
And
Sort of keep them honest with things.
Yeah, just to keep the conversation. So we met a lot with the Border Patrol, and
Okay.
in those days, the Border Patrol, a lot of them, were older Border Patrol agents, and they were saying, "Hey, we didn't sign up to pick up dead bodies in the desert. We need humanitarians out there." And yet, some of the younger agents were saying, "Hey, this is just giving migrants false hope that there's water out there, and it's enticing and encouraging people to cross." And so we met a lot with the Border Patrol, and it was determined that they couldn't stop us from doing humanitarian work. And in fact, after 20 years, going on 22 years now, the Border Patrol or the federal government has actually tried to take us to court, or the humanitarian groups, over 30 times.
Wow, 30 times.
And they have lost each time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that they were trying to take you to court. So this is like federal court?
Yeah, for volunteers putting water out, arresting them. In those early days, a part of our protocol was to actually take people to hospitals and to medical centers if they're in bad shape. And we told the Border Patrol we were going to do that, and they knew we were doing that. And then they, after watching us do that for 10 years, they finally stopped some of our volunteers and arrested them and tried to convict them for aiding and abetting and trafficking. And the federal judge said, hey, you cannot throw the book at these people. You've watched, they've been telling you they were doing this for 10 years. You can't just go off and arrest
suddenly
them.
Do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say that
just last year, Scott Warren, one of the No More Deaths volunteers, was tried in federal court twice and was acquitted both times.
Okay. I think I saw that case. I think I saw an article about that case. So,
yeah.
So in general, would you say you'd had a mixed relationship over the years with Border Patrol and the Border Patrol agents themselves, or?
Yeah, it really depends. We've had, Tucson sector is really an area where it's, for many years it was the most active sector, and so they would bring new chiefs in, and they would be advanced into the hierarchy within a year. And so it was very hard to build a long-term relationship with the chief because they were kind of here for a year and then they were
And then they moved
advancing.
on to something else. Okay.
But yeah, we've met with the Border Patrol all along, and we've also really, out in the field, we are not shy about stopping and talking with Border Patrol agents. And the vast majority of those agents are very open to us and really appreciate the work we're doing. I mean,
that's good.
Sometimes you'll have an agent that is really
belligerent or
a little not supportive and doesn't want to talk to us or whatever.
Okay.
And so just back to after, so we started, this first group was called Humane Borders. Excuse me. And it was a border group putting water out. What we found was, after doing that for about a year or so, that we were running into so many people, migrants in the desert, that sometimes we didn't get out to put the water out. And so then we founded the Tucson Samaritans. Okay. And the Tucson Samaritans were really a group that was to go out and look for migrants in distress and to have water, medical care, food, clothing to give to migrants. And we would run into groups of 20, 30, 40, 100 people at times.
100 people. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And, we would make these migrant packs, and sometimes we'd go through 1,000 migrant packs in a week.
Oh, wow.
So, those were days when, people are worried about these caravans, but the reality is there were times from about 2001 through 2006, 2007, where there were literally times out in the desert, from Sasa Bay over in Douglas. We also have heard that, there were 2,000 people crossing a day in those areas. And so at any time, there could be 25,000 people in the desert between Sasa Bay and Tucson, or Douglas and Tucson.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
That's nothing, that's massive numbers compared to these caravans of 2,000 or 3,000 people.
So you put out water, you started with doing that, then you started with actually doing searches. So tell me, what else does the group specifically, how are you specifically involved in, and what are the tasks for our audience? What specifically does the organization do?
So basically our mission is nobody should suffer and die in the desert. So we're trying to prevent death in the desert until our government, both Republicans and Democrats, can figure out a comprehensive immigration reform and begin to address the root causes. Why is there so much violence in El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala that people are leaving? Much of it is caused by policies of the United States.
Yeah.
And so how do we, as people of faith and humanitarians, how can we sit by and watch people die in the desert? And so what we've come to terms with is that there are, so we put water out. We put water out on the migrant trails. And we don't care if it's migrants. We don't care if it's Border Patrol. Border Patrol uses our water. Hunters use our water. Hikers use our water. There probably are cases where traffickers might use our, drug traffickers or other folk that, may use our water. We're not supporting that, but we're basically saying we need to at least be in the business of saving lives. So we put water out. We also are out in the desert, watching the desert, looking for people in distress. They usually come to the side of the roads. And so we're a humanitarian presence in the desert. We also go to Mexico.
Now you have that shelter in Mexico,
work in the shelters, but also in the migrant aid centers to give food, water, and medical care to migrants that have been deported, because many of those folks will try and return, making another attempt. And we try to tell them not to. It's too dangerous. But if they do, we want them to be healthy. We don't want them to be starting out already dehydrated. So we're there present. We also work in the court systems. We go to Operation Streamline. We go to the detention centers to give support. As you know, I'm a pastor. Scripture calls us to be present. Matthew 25 says, Jesus says, "When I was in prison, did you come and visit?" So we seek to be in those places to give support and legal assistance if we can to folks.
Can you explain what Operation Streamline is to our audience? So
Operation Streamline is and it's during COVID, it's not happening, but
that was going to be another question if that's actually still happening. So
Operation Streamline is in normal times is a very expedited process where the courts can try 75 migrants that have entered into the United States through the desert. They can try them en masse in about 2 hours and convict them and return them either to Mexico, or they can put them in detention center for a period of time, depending on if they have prior offenses and all of that. But it's a process that it's used as a deterrent process to deter migrants from coming back into the United States.
Now, your organization has evolved over the years. So it started as Humane Borders, and then you went to Tucson Samaritans, and now it's the Green Valley-Sahuarita Samaritans with the dual communities there. So how many volunteers approximately do you have, like on an annual basis?
So let me just clarify. Humane Borders was the first group, and it still exists.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
They still exist. Tucson Samaritans is a separate group that still exists in Tucson. We also helped found No More Deaths, which is also another humanitarian group that really tries to have sets up camps and is doing a lot of advocacy work now. They're still around. We broke off into our own separate group about 18 years ago. Basically because it didn't make it, those are all Tucson-based groups. It didn't make any sense for us to drive to Tucson to get into a vehicle and come down here. So we had a big, it was called the Border Issues Fair about 18, 19 years ago. And it was really to educate the community. We had about 250 people that showed up. And at the end of that gathering, we had a long list of people that were right here in our community that wanted to be part of a humanitarian group. So that's when we formed the Green Valley-Sahuarita Samaritans. And we presently have, about 300 volunteers. It's always hard, because of COVID, it's hard to say where our numbers are right now, but we have a good core of at least 100, 150 people that are still active. And some other things we also do, we do work in the shelters in Tucson with asylum seekers. And so, the issue that we're really engaged in is, we have some really solid programs, but within any justice organization, there's always new projects and right now the Border Patrol 6 months ago started deporting the people that were found in the desert immediately in Sasabe. And so Sasabe is really a very small community in Mexico, very remote, and it really was a community that there was no support for them. And so they were dumping 100 migrants into deporting them every day, and the community had no resources to take care of them. So we started bringing food and water over there and medical care. But then the government decided to move all those people, and they're now deporting people over in Douglas and Agua Prieta area. So now that's about 2 hours away. So we have people driving over there to support the groups there.
So you mentioned medical care. So you have doctors and nurses as well, or?
Yeah, we usually, in our searches, the folks that are out in the desert always have either a doctor, a nurse, or an EMT trained person.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That is present to, yeah, so we usually try to have 3 people on a search.
Okay.
When
And
we're
so
doing,
somebody's a medically trained person and one of those people are, okay.
yeah, one of the people needs to be a medically trained person, and one person needs to speak Spanish.
Oh, okay.
So,
So you're a pastor at Good Shepherd United Church of Christ. And so how is this group, is it intertwined with the ministry that's there? Is it, um, how does
yeah,
that work?
yeah. So when we founded our Samaritan group, I went to the church council and said, you know, there's a large group of folks in the community that want to form this humanitarian group, and we need a sponsor. We need a place where we can, you know, that can receive and receive money. And eventually we were going to buy a vehicle, and we needed to have insurance and a title. And so we needed to sit that under a 501c3 nonprofit. And so the church council voted to support that and to be the official sponsor of the Samaritans. And so
Great.
we run, you know, the Samaritans does all of its own fundraising. We don't use church funds for that. And yet, you know, we raise about $60,000 to $80,000 aside from, and so the church, you know, they're probably a third to a half of the participants are from the Good Shepherd.
Oh, okay.
The Good Shepherd, but a good, you know, at least a half or more are from the community. They're people coming from other churches. They're coming from they're non-faith people of conscience that just want to make a difference in this issue. And so that's pretty much how we run it. There's no membership, although, you know, the church people take responsibility for this project.
Okay. So in the last year with COVID, there's been some changes everywhere, obviously. So has there been less attention to the immigration issue in general because people are dealing with their own things here in this country? You talked a little bit about how your operation has changed. Your actual, the operation has changed because of COVID. Has there been any less sort of attention because of COVID?
Well, we've had to change, you know, internally, we've had to change how we operate.
Yeah.
We've had to change how we do searches, that, you know, the searches have to be either couples or people that are living together, or, you know, we have also purchased some shields in the back seat so that people can ride and not, you know, have a little bit, and people are wearing masks. And so that's, but we're still having 5 to 6 searches a week.
Okay.
You know, the water, people dropping water are doing the same thing. Sometimes we're using a couple of vehicles at a time, out on the dropping water or on searches. So that's changed a little bit. The migrant traffic has in many ways slowed down, but like I said, the deaths have really increased. And so our presence is really important out there. And so we're getting in more remote areas because that's where the migrants are being pushed, is in really difficult areas. Yeah, so that's basically how things, you know, and then with all of the different immigration issues, as far as the previous administration really making it very difficult for immigrants along the border, for asylum seekers, you know, the border has really just been tightened down. And so the only people that are really crossing the border are people that are crossing through the desert. Okay. And they're fewer numbers, and mostly men. And yeah, so that's basically what's happening.
Okay. Do you expect in the next few years that things will change with the new administration has promised different immigration policies? Yeah. So do you expect things to change because of that, or things to change only moderately because of that, or?
Yeah, so my view is somewhat skewed. I've been on the desert for 4 administrations, 4 presidential administrations. Okay. And, you know, for each one of those administrations, all the way back to Clinton, you know, each administration has actually put lots of bricks into a wall, or, you know, building up the militarization of the border, bringing more
Right.
agents, having more deportations. It hasn't really mattered if it's been a Democrat or a Republican.
Oh, okay.
The buildup of the border and the buildup of the wall, you really you couldn't get to President Trump without Clinton, Bush, or Obama. They
Okay.
all created the
They all
foundation.
contributed to this.
All contributed, and you know, the issue is that President Trump, really used a lot of executive actions and really diverting funds from the military to build the wall,
Right.
and things like that. So, you know, the difference now is that there is, you know, and we're only 2 weeks into the Biden administration, the shift from President Trump to President Biden is significant.
Okay.
And yet, you know, are we going to see the big changes that we all, at least along the border and immigrant rights people, are hoping for?
A more compassionate.
Yeah, we would like to see that. It's probably not going to be as much as we would like. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we know that, you know, you know, when Biden was being sworn in, his inauguration, the blasting of Guadalupe Canyon was happening as he was being inaugurated, to build more wall. Most
Wow.
of that stopped immediately, except, you know, the money that was being diverted from the Defense Department was stopped immediately.
Right.
And then it took another week or so to wind down all the other construction.
So you've actually had wall construction happening along the border
yeah, and it's
in southern Arizona. Okay.
It's been massively destructive. It is
Wow. Okay.
painful to see places in the desert where there really was no migrant traffic. It was you know, in really difficult areas. And, you know, there were places that we never would have dreamt that anybody would try to build a wall, because it was mountainous and canyons.
Yeah.
And just to get there was so difficult. But, you know, basically President Trump wanted to fulfill his motto. It's not that the wall was going to help anything. It didn't stop any immigration. What it did was fulfill his motto. And for people in middle America that don't live down here, it probably doesn't matter. But for people that live here along the border, and it really is Republican and Democrat, we see this wall as being absolutely ridiculous and serving no function other than being a political gimmick for President Trump. It hasn't stopped anything, really. COVID has probably stopped more of the immigration. And, you know, everybody will say, even the Border Patrol agents, you'll talk to them and they'll say, you know, the road is probably more important than the wall, because we can get to places a little bit quicker. The wall, for most of the people, is only slowing them down a minute or two. And that's not going to make any,
because you can just go over and go around it somewhere, or just know where to cross.
And, you know, the wall has been, the parts of the wall that have been built now are parts that are most expensive, you know, 40,
because they're in remote places. And
yeah, so we're talking $40 million a mile in most of these places. Wow. And, you know, for a migrant, that's not slowing them down. So it's $46 million that was, you know, just wasted, really.
Wow. Okay.
You know, you probably would have done better, you know, from a financial perspective, you would have been better giving a migrant $10,000 and telling them to go build a business in Mexico. That would have been
Been a better use of funds. Yeah.
That would have probably been a better deterrent than to build a wall that they can climb over in a minute.
Okay. Okay.
So,
do you get any reaction or blowback from local leaders or politicians or people that just see you like in the van because with a sticker on the side that says Samaritans, and they kind of know what you do, and they maybe they don't agree with it, or
yeah, we get some blowback. It seemed like it was more intense 5, 6, 7 years ago. Some of it, I don't know. People know what we do. We do run into people out in the field, but by and large, most people that we run into are saying, hey, here's $20. I believe in what you're doing, and I want to support what you're doing.
So people will just come up to you and give you $10 out of their wallets.
But yeah, you're filling up the Samaritan van, and somebody will come over and say, hey, and I've heard about you guys. I believe what you're doing. Here's some money.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying this. It happens on a regular basis.
Okay.
And,
okay.
Our communities are, the Sahuarita and Green Valley are really fairly conservative. But people down here,
they see it though.
They see it.
They see it and they live it.
They see it and they live it. And, there's been enough, there's 5 ranchers out in Cochise County that every news crew will come down and interview. And, they're pro-wall and anti-immigrant, and but
okay,
right next to them are a number of other ranchers that nobody goes out to interview, but they don't even lock their houses at all because it's so safe.
Okay.
There really is. It's become a very hot political issue, and that's the sad thing about it. It's the issue has not been based really on facts, and it hasn't really been based on sound policy. Most of this has been just political rhetoric, and in many ways racist and anti-immigrant. The reality during this COVID-19 lockdown is that the immigrant community is what kept this economy going.
Yeah. Okay.
They were the backbone. They were the people that were going to work and keeping food on our tables, and the hospitals open, and all of that was happening. And so what immigration reform really should be about is honoring and recognizing how important these essential migrant workers are to our society and our livelihood, and saying, we want you already are part of our community. We want you to be able to work out in the open and be part of our community, because you are the hardworking essential workers.
You keep it running. You are the essential people here.
But it's been, President Trump was always saying, oh, they're all rapists, and they're all drug runners, and
murderers, and
hey, it's not saying that there aren't some bad apples, but in our regular population, the percentage of bad apples is much higher.
Statistically speaking, it's less. So
so some of it is, how do we really change the conversation to say, we have not regularized immigration status for people ever since 1986.
And what do you mean by that? Regularized?
Regularizing is that we've always had people coming into the country
Mm-hmm.
undocumented,
Right.
and we've regularized their immigration status.
Okay.
There was, every 20 years or less, basically saying, hey, we want you to be part of our society, and here's the way to do that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We have not done that since 1986.
Hmm.
And so that's
Yeah.
the side of the puzzle that, we now have probably 20, 25 million people in the United States
Yeah.
that are part of the fabric of our country, and yet they have no legal standing here. And yet, if we were to take those 25 million people out of our society would crumble.
Fall apart. Yeah.
The economy would really struggle.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's the right thing to do. And instead, what we've done as a country is to
Ultra criminalize it.
to criminalize them, and yet they're, you can look around the country and they're the people that are their kids are the valedictorians in almost every school. It's that's what the United States has been built on, is the innovation and the entrepreneurial energy from migrants. And letting them and including them rather than excluding them and criminalizing them. And so we've really we're at a challenging point, and that's where, I know the politics are really ugly right now. But we're at a point where, are we really going to turn back from the best part of our history, or are we going to walk into a really ugly chapter where being an immigrant or being a refugee is now seen as a negative thing? In the past, it was always seen as, hey, we have room. Emma Lazarus. Give us your huddled masses. And
that's when, in growing up in the 70s, that's what I learned that made America great was one of the top things that made America great, is that we were a melting pot, and that people could come here and try and achieve a dream for themselves and a better life. And we were proud of that people can come from different places and be free. And then all of a sudden, 5 years ago, things like really took a hard turn for me. Maybe I was just unaware of it. And maybe it was always there, and maybe I wasn't aware of it, but it seemed like, wow, people are really against not only, illegal immigration, illegal immigration, anybody. It just seemed like it was really extreme.
We're turning our back on our values and our history. And we're, the persecuted no longer can count on a country like the United States to protect them. And once we lose those values of, we're not going to be a country that protects the persecuted or the weak or the different. We're moving into a space that this country does not know, or we know, and it's been the ugliest parts of our history. And we need to turn to the better parts of our nature and our better, we have parts of our history that have tried to make a difference and tried to do the right thing. So there is a little bit of hope with the Biden administration, because it is in such contrast from the Trump administration. But it's got, what I always learn is that, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen because we demand that as the people of this country, and that we push and we prod. William Sloane Coffin always used to say, you have to be a lover's critic of your country. You can't just sit around and say, oh, I'm patriotic and the United States is nothing but good. We have to be critical. We have to love our country enough to be critical of it when it fails. And we're
Wow.
not,
Yeah. I agree
we're
with that. Yeah.
we're at a point in time where we're not being critical of, or the large majority of the people aren't being critical enough. They're just accepting and waving a flag and saying, hey, I'm patriotic. Well, that flag needs to stand for something, and it needs to stand for the values, the deep values that this country has stood for. Or it's going to be, it's just superficial to wave a flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe in deep patriotism, not superficial patriotism.
That's good. That's really good stuff. I like what you said there. Speaking from someone from middle America, I feel as if there's a lot of people, my neighbors and friends around here, they just don't know what really goes on at the border, because all we see and hear about from either side actually is those people that go and interview the rangers and the ranchers, excuse me, or some other pundit who wants to sort of spin this for a political point. And so how can people learn more about what actually happens there by traveling there to see places like yours? How can we find out more about what really happens at the border? Because that for me made a huge difference. It's like being there. I go to these assemblies where we have religious leaders in our association. I do these talks about my time there with you and my time in Texas, and people are really interested because they just don't know. All they hear about is what they hear on cable news. So what are some more things that we can do to find out the truth here about numbers? I mean, just like where people come, people assume that people are coming from Mexico when that's not really true. Most migrants, asylum seekers are coming from Central America now. So right there is just one fact,
Yeah. I think there's a lot of ways, it does take a little bit of work. Some of it is to, it's important to be critical about your news sources, to listen to different news sources, to get conservative perspectives and progressive perspectives. It's important to listen to international news outside of our country. What are they saying? That's one way to just be critical of, use some critical thinking skills and not just buy into one perspective.
I think like seeing the map that you have, that in other groups have, of like just the deaths that people in 1 year or just in a few months, the red dots. I think that opens up people's eyes that, hey, this is life and death. It's not just some political talking point.
Yeah. The other way to look at it is, really to look at root causes. What are root causes?
Yes.
Is really important. It's important to read some novels and to read some nonfiction of immigration. I can't remember any of the, there's just a lot of good writing that's happening about immigration, about, telling the story of immigrants.
One of the things that
documentaries.
Okay. One of the things I'm very interested in, I haven't been there before, but your Border Works convention happens in January every year.
Yeah,
and, this year it focused a lot on artistic. Is it always more of an artistic sort of approach, or like music and art? I thought that was very interesting. You spoke of novels and nonfiction.
So we do Common Ground on the Border.
Common Ground on the Border. I'm sorry.
And it really is modeled off a program called Common Ground on the Hill, a sister organization in Maryland. But it really is using the arts to engage and learn about important issues.
Okay.
You know, they use it, you know, around learning about civil rights issues and the Civil War and Appalachia and you know, the slave era, and you know, the music and the arts that came out of that. But we're using it down here is, you know, we have Ted Ramirez, seventh generation songwriter, telling the story of his family and music. The Ronstadt family does a class on canciones de mis padres. You know, just trying to use the arts, and then we have a lot of different other. Somebody playing the panpipes from Colombia. There's painting, there's poetry,
Okay.
there's writing classes. We have concerts, and then we also have
Yeah.
some keynote lectures. David Carrasco from Harvard, scholar, Mexican American scholar, talking about the killings in El Paso, and then tying that together, remembering their names, but also tying that into immigration, and then also even tying it into how Mexico was founded and developed, and you know, the Virgen de Guadalupe, the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Yeah.
You know, just incredible. Margot Cowan, an attorney in Tucson, talked about, you know, the immigration, where we sit with immigration right now. And so really some pretty deep conversation about the border through the lens of art. And,
Okay.
And sometimes the arts can, you know, the art can open people's eyes up sometimes in ways that people may not know, and
Yeah.
it kind of softens people up to hear the story,
And it builds appreciation for culture and history.
And that's what it is. What I like to say is, you know, the borderlands is really a culture of its own. We have incredible food, we have language, it's the mixture of Spanish and English, there's these arts, there's all of this beauty, rather than being
the food.
demonized, and being told as how dangerous it is here. We would prefer to lift up the beauty and the diversity and the incredible wealth of culture that happens here in the borderlands, rather than you know, we get a little irritated when law enforcement gets on the radio and tells everybody how dangerous it is, when the reality is our communities are the safest in the country.
Yeah.
We have far fewer violent crimes than anywhere else in the country.
Yeah.
Murders and things like that. Even though, you know, people from Middle America will probably hear those law enforcement or those 5 ranchers, and they'll say, "Oh, I can't go down there; it's too dangerous."
Yeah.
So, so our common ground on the border event is really we had to do it virtually this year, but usually when we do it, it's just a big celebration of all sorts of pieces coming together, and it's really beautiful.
Great. How can people help your efforts there if they can't come in person?
The best way is you can either get on our Green Valley-Sahuarita Samaritans webpage, and there is a PayPal.
And I will include the link there. Yeah.
Yeah, you can send gifts that way. You can send it through the church, to the church, and there's an address on our webpage. Or you can go to the Good Shepherd United Church of Christ in Sahuarita's webpage, and you can find all of those links as well.
So donations.
Okay. Donations is the best. Financial donations is the best. Okay. Especially right now, because we have you know, people do send items, but we're having a hard time getting things across right now.
Okay.
Across the border because of COVID, and
I
think Nogales, Mexico, is in a code 5, and so
Hmm.
getting across the border is really hard.
Okay. Okay.
So
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your work? Is there a story? Is there anything that more you'd like to share with us?
yeah, the story I like to say, well, there's a few stories.
Sure.
We go out in the desert, and many times, we're literally going out there to save lives.
Yeah.
And we've found people, we've had to call EMTs, we've had to call the Border Patrol and bring their helicopter to rescue somebody.
Wow.
And we've literally saved lives. But in this process, what we've also learned is our lives are being saved. By learning the stories and learning about the family and the ethic and the love of the horror stories that they're coming from.
The sort of my salvation is tied with yours.
Yeah, and it really is a transformation. I realize I've been doing this for 25 years. And it's my eyes and my ears and my soul has had to be opened up. And it has been by encounters with migrants. And I know people may have a hard time understanding that. But when you go on a journey with a group, with a culture and a people, you are transformed by that journey. And, I grew up in Montana. It's hard for me to necessarily go back to Montana because I've become something completely different.
Okay.
So the other story, I think that happens all the time, but I think it can happen in Ohio, it can happen in Iowa by people just venturing out and getting to know their neighbors. And many of them are migrant workers. And to not stigmatize them and say, oh, they're from somewhere else.
Right.
Open yourself up and begin to learn about them and walk with them, and your life will be changed in ways that you never would have. And it will be a blessing, I can guarantee you. The other story, and this happens a lot, is, people that are really anti-immigrant, and have made it very public, will have a migrant stop at their house and knock on their door and say,
wow,
do you have water, or I need medical care, or, just help. And the person doesn't know what to do, but they will give us a call. They know about us and they say, and by the time we arrive, they've learned the story of this migrant. And before you know it, they're saying, hey, I really want to help this person.
Okay.
I know their story. This person is different than the other migrants. And they have a family in Ohio, and they just came home. They just crossed the border to go to a funeral and to help their family in Mexico financially.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to get back. They already own a home. Their wife is a U.S. citizen. How can we help them get reunited? And the reality is, that person's had a transformation, but that story is told over and over and over again. Once people meet somebody face to face, they begin to see the humanity in that. And that's all we're asking is just risk a little bit.
Okay.
I would make the statement that everybody needs a migrant as a friend. But I would go on and I would say everybody needs a Muslim in their life to really learn about the Islamic traditions and to begin to see them as human, and that their faith is really rich and we need to respect it and walk with them. It's, everybody needs all of these different, if we're really going to be on a journey of learning about ourselves and making our world better, we need to be better friends and neighbors, and see that there's richness of culture and faith all around us.
Great. Yeah. Well, I thank you for your time, Reverend Mayer, and thank you so much for being with me this afternoon and for your time and for answering our questions here. And we really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you, Darren. I appreciate it and look forward to hearing more from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.